In 490 BC, the Battle of Marathon became one of the most iconic underdog wins in history. On one side stood Persia, the superpower of the ancient world under Darius I, and on the other, Athens and a few allies with barely a fraction of the manpower. Most expected Persia to steamroll them. It was supposed to be a foregone conclusion. Instead, the Greeks pulled off a win so unexpected that it became legend. This wasn't just a clash of armies, it was a cultural statement. Marathon showed that small communities, fueled by strategy, discipline, and civic unity, could go toe-to-toe with an empire. It turned Athens into a symbol of freedom and identity, while planting the seeds for what later became the Marathon Race, a lasting metaphor for endurance and courage. And for those who don't know, welcome to Chronos History, where we break down the greatest moments in history and turn them into greater stories. Whether you're bored, learning, or somewhere in between, we've got something cooked up for you to keep you entertained. So without further ado, let's jump right into it. The tension had been building for decades. Persia under Darius had absorbed Asia Minor, including Greek coastal cities like Miletus and Ephesus. On paper, they kept their autonomy, but in reality, they were forced to pay tribute, follow Persian officials, and fight in Persian wars. For Greeks who prized independence, this arrangement felt simply suffocating. The breaking point came with the Ionian Revolt back in 499 to 494 BC. With help from Athens and Eretria, Ionian cities tried to shake off Persian control, even managing to burn Sardis. But the backlash was brutal. Persia crushed the revolt and destroyed Miletus. Darius took it personally. Athens and Eretria had meddled, and he wanted payback and nothing else. He also saw an opportunity, tightening his grip on the Aegean and maybe even conquering mainland Greece itself. Now, Greek politics only made things easier for him. City-states were constantly competing with each other. Some cut deals with Persia while others resisted. For Darius, fragmented Greece looked like easy prey. So after years of simmering conflict, he launched an expedition in 490 BC aimed squarely at Attica. Darius sent commanders Dates and Artaphernes with an expeditionary force. On their way across the Aegean, they subdued islands and burned Eretria, enslaving its survivors as a warning of what Athens could expect. Athens now stood nearly alone. Sparta, the heavyweight of Greek warfare, claimed religious obligations that kept them from marching immediately. Athens sent a desperate runner, Phytopides, to beg for their help, but the Spartans promised only to come later. That left Athens with around 10,000 hoplites, joined by 1,000 from the small city of Plataea, their most loyal ally. And together they marched to Marathon, a plain 40 kilometers from Athens where the Persians had landed, an area perfect for Persian cavalry. For days, the two armies just stared each other down. The Athenians hesitated. The Persians expected time to work in their favor, perhaps through treachery in Athens or sheer attrition. Within the Athenian command, debate raged. Some argued for retreat behind the city walls. Miltiades, however, insisted they couldn't wait. Having fought Persians before, he knew delaying would only let Persia bypass them by sea, and his case carried the day. Athens would fight. At dawn, the Athenians advanced. Persian numbers were much larger. Ancient writers exaggerate into the hundreds of thousands, like they always do, but most modern estimates suggest around 20 to 25,000 Persians against roughly 11,000 Greeks. Even so, besides all of the exaggerations and looking at the more or less realistic numbers, the imbalance was stark. Miltiades arranged the Athenian line in an unusual formation. He thinned the center and reinforced the wings. And when the Greeks charged, running in armor, which is something unheard of, the Persians were caught off guard. In the center, the Athenians struggled under Persian pressure as their lines were thinner, but the stronger wings broke through and swung inward, trapping Persia's infantry in a pincer movement. For reasons still debated, Persian cavalry was absent at this crucial moment, leaving their infantry exposed. And with no support, their line finally collapsed. Thousands fled to the ships, but many were cut down on the beach. The Athenians even captured 7 Persian vessels. Losses were staggering. Over 6,000 Persians dead to fewer than 200 Greeks, according to Herodotus. Persia made one last move. attempting to sail around and strike Athens directly. But the hoplites, still energized, force-marched back to the city just in time to block them. And now, the Persians are faced with determined defenders once again, so they retreated. Marathon ended as one of antiquity's most celebrated victories. Against all odds, Athens had checked the most powerful empire of the age. For the Greeks, it proved that free citizens could resist imperial might. For Athens, it was the first step in their rise to leadership in Greece, and in cultural memory, it became an eternal emblem of resilience. A win like Marathon was never going to stay just history. It instantly became a legend. For the Greeks, it felt almost miraculous. A small band of free citizens had just outplayed one of the most powerful empires on the planet. Naturally, the story grew taller with each retelling. Patriotism, myth, and a desire to see divine fingerprints on the victory all fused into a narrative that made Marathon more than just a battle. It became a cultural myth. The most famous legend is, of course, the runner. Everyone knows the story, the exhausted messenger sprinting from Marathon to Athens, bursting out, "Rejoice, we're victorious," before collapsing dead on the spot. It's cinematic, but here's the twist. Herodotus, our main source, actually never mentions it. He only records Phytopides running before the battle to beg Sparta for help. The post-battle sprint story shows up later with Plutarch and Lucian, and eventually snowballed into the myth that inspired the modern marathon race. History or not, it stuck, because it was too good a story to just let go. Other legends went full mystical. Athenians believed their hero founder Theseus literally showed up, ghost style, in armor on the battlefield to rally the troops. His spirit was said to push the soldiers into the decisive attack, and afterward the city even built a shrine to honor him at Marathon. Another tale brings in the god Pan, who supposedly appeared to Phytopides on his run to Sparta, promising to help if Athens gave him a cult. So after the win, the Athenians followed through, carving out a sanctuary at the foot of the Acropolis and offering yearly sacrifices. In their minds, Marathon wasn't just a military triumph, it had divine signatures all over it, to the point where even ordinary Athenians were immortalized as semi-legendary. Callimachus, the city's polemarch, which is a chief military officer, was killed but remembered for holding the line when things looked bleak. Another warrior, Cynaegirus, supposedly clung to a Persian ship as it tried to escape, dying in the act but entering the collective memory as the kind of hero schoolboys were told to emulate. So in a sense, Marathon blurred the line between myth and reality. Gods, ghosts, and everyday soldiers all became part of the same divine story. Beyond the legends, Marathon had very real consequences. Militarily, it proved the hoplite phalanx, the disciplined wall of citizen soldiers, could go up against imperial forces that relied partially on mercenaries. Athens suddenly realized that its citizens weren't just participants in politics. They were capable of defending their own polis on equal footing with the world's superpower. That confidence fed directly into Athens' rise later on. In the decades that followed, the city leaned into its growing prestige, took a leading role against Persia, and eventually turned itself into a naval empire through the Delian League. But the cultural legacy ran even deeper. For Athens, Marathon was eternal proof that unity and courage could defeat overwhelming odds. They built a burial mound at the battlefield, not only to honor the fallen, but to enshrine them in a collective memory. Orators and teachers brought the story into daily life, presenting it as the ultimate civic parable. Fight for your city and your name will live forever. Heroes like Callimachus and Cynaegirus were remembered alongside mythical figures, blending history with legend. Marathon also carried heavy symbolic weight. For the Greeks, it was the triumph of the free citizens over the imperial subject, the polis over despotism, democracy over tyranny. Centuries later, that symbolism was picked up again. In the 19th and 20th centuries, European national movements looked back at Marathon as the blueprint for their own struggles for freedom. It became shorthand for courage against impossible odds, resonating far beyond just ancient Greece. And then there is the race. The tale of Phytopides may be shaky historically, but it was irresistible to later generations. When the modern Olympic Games launched in 1896, the organizers leaned on the story to invent the marathon as an event. What started as an embellished tale of a single runner became one of the most iconic athletic challenges in the world, a living echo of the battle's legacy. The Battle of Marathon wasn't just a fight in a field near Athens. It became a myth, a lesson, and eventually a global symbol. To the Athenians, it proved that freedom and civic unity could hold the line against overwhelming power. To later generations, it was a reminder that courage, even from a few, can change the fate of the many. And thanks to a blend of history and some legend, the name Marathon still carries weight today, whether whispered in the speeches of orators, etched into tombs of heroes, or shouted at the finish line of a 26-mile race. 2.5 millennia later, the echo of that day on the plain still hasn't faded. Well, and that's all for today's video, guys. If you liked our work, please consider clicking that like button and subscribing to the channel, as this will help the channel immensely, and it is the best reward for our work. We really can't ask for anything else. And until next time, see you again on Chronos History.